there was a lot of athletes and a lot of her peers that were leaving sport and didn't have the same opportunity or chances that she was having. And she wanted to bring something together which harnessed those really unique experiences that athletes have in terms of growth mindset, resilience, dealing with setbacks, that confidence, that belief, and how you could harness that to unlock the potential in young people, but also provide a safe space for athletes to find a new identity beyond sport, to find a new value beyond sport, and to give them that space where their success is celebrated by their peers, but also those experiences are used for social impact and social good. So that was where the charity was formed and born from. And the vision hasn't changed. I think the how's changed quite a lot, but the vision is still the same. So every program we deliver is always through a world-class athlete who we train to work with young people.
From Coordinate Sports, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guests on the show today are Ben Hilton and Suzanne Miller of the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust. Kelly launched the trust in 2008 to create a legacy from her athletics career that would benefit young people. She believes every child needs a superhero, someone to look up to and be inspired by. Ben found the sport for development sector through his passion for helping others. He brought his background in performing arts to the role of CEO and now leads the trust to its goal of helping 10,000 young people with their variety of programs. Suzanne is an ex-elite level badminton player who has represented Great Britain countless times. Now an athlete mentor and leading her own badminton academy, she's committed herself to supporting and training a new generation of young people. Enjoy the show. Okay, so I'm delighted to welcome Ben Hilton and Suzanne Miller. Ben is CEO of the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust, working towards the goal of helping 10,000 young people with their patented programs across the country. And Suzanne is actually an athlete mentor at the Trust, using her experience of representing GB in badminton to support the next generation. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
No, I've been looking forward to this one. And I just wanted to, start probably two different, with two guests, so two different stories. But generally, we always look at giving our guests a bit of an insight and get to know you a little bit better. So we always start at childhood. I guess I'll throw it open to whoever wants to go first. But could you describe your childhood for us?
So I grew up in Cornwall, so very rural sort of upbringing. Spent most of my life as a sort of teenager on the beach, and just sort of skating and surfing were sort of my priorities at the time. Didn't sort of really tap into education at all at a young age. Didn't really enjoy school or enjoy sort of the setup there. So didn't really do very well academically at a young age, and then sort of had to take sort of the college route. But always had a love and a passion for drama. And drama was the one GCSE that I got, and it was the one that took me through the college route and the university route sort of later on in life. But growing up, sort of single parent household, sort of from 11, 12 years of age, but had a fairly, I suppose, exciting upbringing. Cornwall's a great place. Every sort of summer, you get a whole influx of new people to come into the area where you can talk, and there's lots of sort of summer holiday jobs and things like that going on. So it was fun, it was exciting. But
you said about school there, maybe it didn't resonate with you. Was it just a kind of the academic side of school, or that maybe wasn't speaking to you? Say if you went into drama,
I was quite a hyperactive young person, which didn't really fit in well with the classroom. So I don't think I was a naughty person, but I was very hyperactive, lots of energy, really struggled to focus in on sort of the more academic lessons, and I was much more sort of practical based. So anything to do with drama and physical activity. So I played in as many sports teams as I could. I sort of represented Redruth at rugby, who were sort of a really good team in Cornwall. So it's anything outdoorsy I was part of.
Could you say anything you could express yourself physically, I guess, yeah. So would you say at that point, like drama was you kind of got the bug for drama and took it from there?
Absolutely. And I think it was all part of the teaching as well. You're allowed to represent yourself, you're allowed to share your ideas. And I just think in that forum where you can speak openly, you can play, you can have fun, but you've got a very different teaching sort of methodology. It's all about expression rather than sort of sitting at a desk and trying to nail down sort of formulas and stuff like that. Yeah. So I was.
Did you have any role models then at that time? Anyone who kind of comes to mind Same
At
at
the
school.
time, it
Yeah.
was my drama teacher. It was Mrs. Bridger. I've recently just done a fundraising challenge to cycle from where I live in Bath back to Truro in her honour.
Oh,
And that
wow.
was all about that person, place, or moment who inspired you to be who you are today. And she definitely was a role model, an inspiration. I'm still in touch with her sons now, but she was a huge advocate for me at school and represented me in a few school meetings where they were sort of
He got you out of
discussing my
trouble.
future. Yeah.
What about you, Suzanne? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Stevenage in Hertfordshire. It's actually famed for a lot of its sports stars, Lewis Hamilton being one, Ashley Young, Ian Poulter.
I think I noticed you. I think I might have noticed you when I was in Stevenage on the mural, maybe.
You might have, because Hall of Fame of Stevenage stars
Exactly, yeah.
is up there as well, which is something I'm super proud of. My parents came over as immigrants in the 70s. My heritage, my father's Malaysian Indian, my mother's Singaporean Chinese. And Stevenage was not very kind of racially diverse. I was one of only a handful of people of colour in my school. So that kind of shaped me. I got into sport because my parents played. Badminton is very, very popular over in Asia. And my dad was kind of a bit of a frustrated athlete himself. He had a really hard background. My dad he was raised in an orphanage. And I think he came over here, as a lot of immigrants do, wanting a better life. Both of them came over to be employed by the NHS as nurses when there was a big recruitment drive. And he coached me for many, many years, all up until I was a professional athlete. So my dad really kind of pushed the badminton, but it always came from me. Me and my sister both played. My sister, she was very, very talented, but I think she just didn't have that kind of that killer instinct. And a lot of the time she suffered a lot with pressure and with nerves, whereas myself, I just had that desire to win at all costs, which kind of set us apart. Me being the younger sibling as well, I think it was easier for me. Our journeys were set up from a very young age with her goal was not to lose to me, whereas mine was to try and beat her. So it kind of sets you up for success a lot earlier.
Yeah, looking at it positive. Yeah, mindset.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that narrative kind of shaped our childhood a lot. I was a good student. I think that kind of very typical Asian kind of mentality of coming over and working hard, keeping your head down and trying to avoid trouble was definitely something that were the messages that I got. So from there, as well as my training, I was doing pretty well at school. I went out, kind of did really well, even at a young age. I just had that desire to win, and I started to win county championships, national championships, very, very young, and all the way through. And I didn't particularly train as hard as some of the others. It was that desire to win above all else and to be like a tough competitor a lot.
Sorry, I was going to say, what did badminton look like? So when you were a kid at primary school, I guess I'm imagining you just like a massive standout outlier to all of the kids who are kind of just doing their regular
there was no
primary PE. Was there no badminton at the time?
No, nothing. At senior school, I was getting a lot of equipment for free from sponsors, and I just give it to the school because I wasn't really using it, which they were super grateful for. That wasn't until senior school. I started playing when I was 9, so I was still in junior school. But I just never really thought to even have the conversation that I was doing well at sport in school because it was so different. People didn't really understand. I was kind of known as that badminton girl. And by the time I was in senior school, obviously I was going out to international competitions and therefore missing bits of school here and there, which people were kind of jealous about. But I was still doing well in school, so it wasn't really ever flagged as an issue. So yeah, I had a great childhood, quite intense. Obviously, with your father as your coach, it does make for some very challenging times where you can't really escape from things. And my dad they started to own their own business. They came out of nursing to own their own nursing agency. So I think there was a lot of stress in their life, and that did filter through to us. And there was some really, really some rocky and challenging times for us all as a family, which still to this day still exists, if I'm completely honest. It shaped me and shaped who I am, which I'm super grateful for.
Yeah, so in terms of your journey, like, could you class it, obviously it's elite level badminton, would it be professional level, or is it more sponsorship based, or is there just for those people who don't know, and myself, in terms of what that looks like as I guess an elite badminton player?
So when you enter elite badminton, you're spotted early on and you're playing the kind of junior international competitions, and that's pretty much funded by yourself and your family. As you then start to approach kind of making a mark on international level in your late teens, around the under 19 level, that's when you start receiving funding from Badminton England, and you're put forward to start training at the National Centre. It was always my idea that I wanted to complete my studies first, because although I was putting all of my efforts into my training and competing, I didn't want to neglect the education side of things as well. So I went to university, and I managed to go to university up in Nottingham, which allowed me to access the training close by in Loughborough. And then after that, then I decided to go full time to badminton and train at the National Badminton Centre. And that's when you receive your GB funding, where they you receive almost like a salary from.
That's like the podium, the lottery podium funding.
Yeah.
Right, fantastic. I'm going to switch back over to Ben, because in terms of with the drama side of things, you've gone off to university. Was that along those lines of drama that you studied, just kind of theatre or drama studies at uni?
Yeah, so it was a bit of a long way to get to university. So when you don't do that well at GCSEs, you've got to take the college route, really. So I did a year in Cornwall doing performing arts, and then I moved up to Manchester at a fairly young age on my own. My family's all from Manchester, but my mum and dad moved down to Cornwall before I was born. So I always had an affinity with Manchester. I'm a Man City fan. I was a junior blue. My first game was Man City versus Plymouth Argyle.
So you were there from the start?
I was there from the start, and now basking in this success. So I moved to Manchester. I didn't really have a clear idea that I was going to go to college. I just wanted to be in a big city. So I moved up there when I was 17 and quickly found that I was just going to waste my time. So I should go to college. I had some good stewardship by my cousins at the time. So I carried on doing performing arts there, and that's where I met some lifelong friends. So I did 2 years performing arts there. I was just going through my university auditions when I got assaulted, and I was in hospital for a couple of months. So I missed the audition sort of process. So I then had a year of waiting basically before I could get into university again. And that's when I followed my friends down to London, who were a year ahead of me by now, and studied drama theatre studies at Middlesex University and lived in Golders Green. And
then following that, did you get into a career in terms of performing as well?
Or? Depends what you call a career, James.
No, I think it's really interesting in terms of like where because you're coming from kind of the performing side and then the sports side, and we're obviously going to talk about the work you're doing at the Trust now and how that kind of fits in. But yeah, how did it go? Is it, I guess, a baptism of fire going into the
Absolutely.
West End?
Yeah, I mean, I was never West End quality. I think it's similar to sport. You know, the pyramid is so huge for people that want to move into acting and the arts. For those that make it, are so few. So I played around with fringe theatre for a part, just around sort of some of the pub theatres in London, but then very quickly realised that wasn't going to pay a wage. So at that moment, I hung up what do you hang up when you're in acting? I hung up something and retired from my acting career. And then
the makeup, maybe. I'm trying to think what you hang up.
Yeah, hung up my makeup, my costume. But yeah, and then just moved into sort of the 9 to 5 working. And at that stage, didn't really have a plan, didn't really know what I was doing. I was just working. And then a number of years before, I got some compensation and went to Thailand for a long holiday. And it was in Thailand that I met my wife, who was traveling back from Australia, where she had been for a year. And this was her last stop before coming to the UK. And I met her at the Half Moon Party in Koh Phangan. And I think from there on, I had much more of a direction and a future of what I wanted to do, and actually having more of a social impact and learning from my friends and the young people how I grew up, about the challenges that young people are facing or that society are facing, and having an understanding that I want to have an impact in that area, and then trying to map out how I do that.
Yeah, I know it's probably relevant to both sides, but in terms of, I guess, as you're coming through, like you said, sport, performing arts, really small numbers make it in the end of the day. But do you think there's maybe something lacking? We could talk about what the Trust's doing, but in terms of that journey, preparing you for that, obviously preparing you to be successful, but is that something that comes up when you're studying studying drama, that potentially might not make it and maybe have a plan B, or is it just a bit of I'm assuming a bit of shell shock when you come out and it's in the real world?
It's an interesting perception. There was very little talk about how these skills translate into anything beyond drama, theatre studies, acting, performance, the arts. There was obviously the conversation of how challenging and how difficult it is, that we will have to face setbacks, we will have to have resilience, we will have to have that sort of self-confidence and self-esteem to keep on going. But there was very little to help us prepare for that, or really to provide that pathway into what does it look like when you leave university.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was almost a baptism.
I guess it's more difficult performing art as well, because you could, with sport, I guess if you got to make it by a certain age, whereas in performing art, you might be a late bloomer or suddenly start getting parts in your 50s, 60s and be a superstar.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's difficult. You might hang on a bit longer. But how was it for you, Suzanne? Did you have kind of that preparation as you're going through the GB system? Was there anything to set you up for life after sport?
That's a really, really good question. And it's a real juxtaposition, because on one hand, I think I was really well supported. I did have a lady that we would speak to that's a bit of a careers advisor that would look for opportunities for us, Dawnette, and she was brilliant. I remember her name so clearly. And she really we had really good conversations about what I wanted to do post-sport. However, there was a bit of an unspoken agreement between the coaches and the players that if you were concentrating on anything else other than your sport, then you're not giving your sport 100%. And having spoken to so many other athletes, I think that is a common thread. It's almost like, well, we don't want to consider anything else because that means that we're not going to succeed in what we're set out to do with our sport.
Yeah, it's almost planting that seed of like, you're kind of not going to make it. You put that bit of negativity in there. Yeah.
Exactly. I think I was just a little bit shrewd, perhaps a little bit greedy and a bit curious as to what my life would hold post-sport. And I feel that I already knew I had other skills before the sport that I wanted to consider. Part of my story of being an athlete is what I did around that time, of how I kind of looked at other things to explore, and we're not just one thing. And I try and impart that information to the young people as well, that although this may be your focus, if that dream is taken away from you for whatever reason out of your control, what else can you look in your life to be really fulfilled? That was one thing. When I was competing, I also had the opportunity to perform. I was doing a lot of singing, and I always wanted to kind of explore that after the sport. However, I found that was really useful when that was taken away from me, and I picked up an injury that, although I could rehab, the squad cut my funding. I had my funding cut. So that was then something I could turn my attention to, almost distract myself and to create a new identity.
Yeah, good point, because I guess that would be, if everything was badminton, if that injury might have been, obviously it would have been really disappointing, big setback, but rather than being devastating and got something else to, you're not just a badminton player essentially. So yeah, it's help you that way.
It's really difficult because your identity as an athlete is so ingrained, and that's something, the trust was set up for athletes to be able to make that transition and to be able to offer something else. But don't get me wrong, it's super difficult, especially if everything that you're working towards. For me, it was the Commonwealth Games and for the Olympics, and to have that dream taken away from you for something so out of your control is devastating. So I think if you do have something that you can turn your attention to, it just helps you through that really, really difficult time.
Yeah, and again, like with the Olympic sports as well, Commonwealth Olympic sports, they're not the most well-funded and commercially as well. But that career you might get in other sports, it's not going to set you up for life in terms of financially, unless you're at the very, very top. So yeah, probably a great time now talking about that success as athletes. So Ben, maybe give us a bit of an origin story of the trust. Obviously, listeners should know, and if they don't, they should be ashamed of themselves if they don't know Dame Kelly Holmes. So and all of her success as an athlete. I'm from a track and field background, so I followed her career really closely. But I'm assuming the trust was born after 2004. But it'd be good for you to give us a potted history or origin story of the trust and what it's setting out to achieve.
Yeah, no, so I'm sure the seed was planted in 2004, but the trust was first set up in 2008, and it was always in Kelly's vision. She's been very public about her troubled or upbringing. Growing up in a single parent house, spent a short amount of time in the care system as a young child, and growing up in a very white community in Kent. And it's similar to me academically. She wasn't the best in the class. I think she was very hyperactive. I think she talks about a lot of times when she was outside of the classroom more than she was in. But she also had a teacher that truly believed in her. And Kelly always says it only takes one person to change your life. So when she was coming to the end of her career, she knew she wanted to do something to support young people who are facing challenges in their lives. At that time, she was an ambassador for a lot of different charities. She really wanted to try to bring all of that into one focus. At the same time as wanting to support young people, she also knew how hard and challenging it is for world-class and elite sports to transition beyond sport. Again, Kelly's been very vocal about her own mental health during sport and after sport, and some of the self-harm that she was doing at that time as well. but she also knew that she was in a privileged position due to the success that she had. And there was a lot of athletes and a lot of her peers that were leaving sport and didn't have the same opportunity or chances that she was having. And she wanted to bring something together which harnessed those really unique experiences that athletes have in terms of growth mindset, resilience, dealing with setbacks, that confidence, that belief, and how you could harness that to unlock the potential in young people, but also provide a safe space for athletes to find a new identity beyond sport, to find a new value beyond sport, and to give them that space where their success is celebrated by their peers, but also those experiences are used for social impact and social good. So that was where the charity was formed and born from. And the vision hasn't changed. I think the how has changed quite a lot, but the vision is still the same. So every program we deliver is always through a world-class athletes who we train to work with young people. Since 2008, we first piloted, I believe, in Knowsley and Reading were the first two locations where the trust worked. And we've worked in all across the UK, 66 regions. We've supported thousands of young people in both school and community settings. And we work in partnerships and collaborations. And everywhere where we work, it's always through a local organisation who understands those real intricate needs of those areas and the needs of those young people. And then we work through the sort of the ecosystem to try to enhance and add value to some of the great work that's already happening on the ground. And for us, I think the trust, it grew very quickly, especially in 2012, the height of sort of the youth riots at the time. And we were moving off in many different directions and supporting young people into employment, looking at sort of education and attainment, looking at lots of different areas. But I think where our key focus is now and what's more prevalent than ever is the health and well-being of young people. And that is our key focus. And that's where the athletes can bring so much of their experience of looking after yourselves in diverse situations and challenging situations and how you can still perform to the best of your ability, but maintaining that perception and lens of looking after yourself at the same time.
In terms of the programs, really wide variety of programs, and like you mentioned at the start, that kind of pattern to them. Is that for your partners to use? And are you able to elaborate, I guess, on the scope of the programs that you're delivering? Because do you have like a corporate model as well where you're working with the organisation?
Yeah, so many charities, we're looking at how we can diversify our income streams, but also the benefit that we have of having such a wide network of athletes with amazing experiences that can unlock the potential in young people, but can also unlock potential in workforces as well. So for our charitable aims, we have sort of three models of programs, really. We have our school-based program, which is all around improving behaviour, attendance and attainment. So working with cohorts of young people who are facing challenges and maybe sort of near the brink of exclusion or suspension, and working with those groups of young people to really see themselves in a different light, see themselves in a positive light, and look at building their aspirations for the future and their relationships with their peers, their community, and their teachers as well. We have community-based programs, and that's where we work with our sort of community organizations. And it is a partnership. It's not, a subcontracted agreement. It's our athletes will go in, work with these delivery partners, with cohorts of young people that they're engaged with that need some additional support and motivation. And we'll work with those young people over a period of 6 to 12 months to improve their physical activity, to improve their outlook in life, their aspirations, but fundamentally to improve their health and well-being. Both of those programs always have an element of community impact and social action, so young people can see themselves in a leadership role. And then the third strand that we do for our charitable objectives is developing young people to be leaders within their own communities. So this is really training young people, as we do our athletes, to be able to write programs, write sessions, deal with groups of young people, deal with challenging behaviour and all the flavours that young people bring out in programs that we deliver. We started this program in Northern Ireland, working with an amazing organisation called Peace Players International, and it was really looking at how can the athletes delivering with a Peace Players coach support young people to go into their communities to challenge some of the societal issues their peers are facing, as well as having discussions around that peace and sectarianism focus, which is over in Belfast. We're now bringing that learning into Sheffield, and we're going to be starting 2 amazing programs in the next calendar year, and developing young people to deliver health and wellbeing activities to year sixes just as they transition to secondary school. So they have that positive association with health and wellbeing when they move through that secondary environment. And then moving on to the corporate side. So yeah, this is fairly new to us. We've been developing it over the last year, but the role that athletes have, the vision that and the inspiration that people can have just by having a 5-minute conversation with an Olympian or Commonwealth medalist, it's really hard to describe, but it's real. And what we've tried to harness is how can the athlete's experience be used within that corporate setting, not just as an inspirational speaker, but really to develop that teamwork, like those communication skills, the resilience when you're dealing with a real challenging project, the timelines are getting close and you're getting, that stress tolerance. So we've got a corporate model now, which we're just bringing in. We've got some great examples already of the impact that it's had within a corporate setting. So that's something that we're definitely growing in the future.
I'm really interested in terms of how you recruit your partners and I guess athletes as well. So if there's an organisation that thinks, I'd really like to get involved in some of the programs you've been talking about, is it a case that they would approach you, or do you kind of find them, or how does it tend to work?
A bit of both, to be fair. So when we receive a big pot of funding, we'll know which regions we're going to be looking at. We'll already have an understanding of some of the due diligence and exercises of looking at who's on the ground in those areas. What are those organisations that share our sort of values and the approach to working with young people? And then we'll approach a range of partners for sort of an expression of interest and ask partners to express their interest to work with the trust. And we'll go through that tendering process. But it does work the other way as well, where partners will come to us and go, we've got a really great idea. We'd love to work with you on this. So an example of that is a large housing association called Sanctuary Housing Group that listened to the needs of their young people. They then invited 4 charities in to find out how they would be able to work with young people in supported living. So young people who are at risk of street homelessness, and they've got supported accommodation for 6 months. And there's a huge amount that needs to happen to try to support that young person to move into independent living. And they were looking for a partner to come in and really stretch young people, really develop their confidence, really look at their aspirations. And that's now been a 2-year partnership that we've had with Sanctuary, and we're looking at how that can be extended as well. So it's a bit of both, but it's always fascinating how these little pockets of fantastic work are going on in communities and how they find out about us and how we find out about them as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting program. So in terms of Suzanne, how were you recruited, or was it a case of did Ben track you down and trying to convince you to get involved, or how did it work for you? What was your journey?
He didn't shoot a dart in me and knock me out.
Yeah, pulled the van around the back of the court.
So many moons ago, as I think I'd just retired from sport, and they ran like a recruitment day for athletes that we were notified about. And I think it was down on a boat somewhere. And I remember seeing the trust amongst other recruiters and kind of vaguely being interested, and didn't really pick up that opportunity. Then I would probably say about 5 years later, I had been running my academy successfully. I'd been out of sport, I'd been working for Nike, I'd been in the corporate world for a while. And it was one of my best friends, Jenny Warwork, who was doing quite a lot of work for the trust. And she had said to me, there's a program going on really near where you live. Why don't you just go and check it out? And it wasn't until I went there and saw it kind of live as a Get On Track program that was led by a basketballer called Drew Spinks that I just loved it. And I just wanted to be there again and again. And I turned up every day of that program from start to finish. It was a 6-week program, and it just completely absorbed me. I could see the change that was happening to the young people. I loved working with the other athletes and almost going through my journey and not realizing how impactful my journey could be to somebody else. And that was the thing that kind of really kept me going. And the thing that I've learned as a mentor over the years that is the most empowering for me, but also for the young person, isn't really just the successes of, I've won this medal, that medal. It's actually sharing the vulnerabilities of as a human being and how we're just exactly the same as these young people, and how those lessons can be put to use for them as well as us. And I think that is the thing that keeps me working for the trust and why I love it so much. It's those moments that are so impactful.
What's the setting look like? I know obviously maybe it's a different program now, but when you're going in and working with young people or athletes, I guess what's a day in the life look like, or a session look like?
It's so different. So currently I'm doing On Track to Achieve program in school. And so normally what happens is you go to the school, you've got a space, and you are delivering a session to increase well-being, to increase their physical activity and understanding the benefits that it can have on their mental health by keeping physically active. And then we kind of explore their personal development, what their goals might be, what are their barriers, how we can then break them down by running not only physical activities, but little challenges, so they can debrief how it went, what they can then do better, what they did well. And when we kind of get at least halfway through the program, then we're looking at a social action program to give back to their community or their school in order that they can increase their well-being and kind of put them to task on something that's really tangible, so they can come away from at the end of the program having achieved something.
I'm really curious. And so obviously you've been running your own academy, assuming that's the commercial academy, right? So you've got those you've been able to use your skills to in the business world as such, so you can be able to make money out of your skills, and as well as having the impact on young people. Is that something you try and pass on as well, in terms of if you've got a skill, how they could essentially make a career out of it rather than kind of going down the
Totally
path? Yeah.
I think that's my kind of unique selling point in my academy, is that it's made me so much better, that strand of my job, by being an athlete mentor.
Yeah.
A lot of the time with the young people that come to me as part of the academy, my narrative is that, not all of us are going to be the best in the world, but what skills you are learning here, what your sport can teach you, sets you up for success in life. It helps you solve problems. It helps your communication. It deals with setbacks and how losing is an opportunity to learn. It doesn't mean that, that your life is over. Understanding that you're going to be losing a lot more than you're winning, and how you kind of break through that, and setting ourselves really small goals to achieve. It's completely kind of revolutionized the way I coached pre-working with the trust to now.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously all those challenges come up running a business, right? You can't avoid them. You have to learn on your feet. Curious around, obviously working with the trust before the pandemic and afterwards, have you seen kind of a change in the young people you're working with, and how they're kind of, how's it affected them as they're coming back into those programs face to face now? What are the kind of trends you're seeing?
I think there is a lot more work to be done now than there was pre-pandemic in regards of mental health, anxieties and confidence. And universally, I'd say across all the programs, we're dealing with a lot more vulnerabilities. I can say that about myself. It was a hard time for all of us. So again, it's just reinforcing those values of what we can do kind of short term to impact the longer term. We were also delivering a workshop specifically about COVID, and looking at our feelings and being able to control what is controllable, phasing out things like, social media if it wasn't particularly helping us, and just looking about how we can take the positives from COVID and what it's taught us about ourselves. I delivered that workshop personally as well, and the feedback we got from that was great, of being able to actually be aware of what was going on and looking at it through how we can kind of positively move forward from it. Was brilliant.
Yeah, that sounds like one that I don't know if you found that when you're delivering it, probably start thinking about yourself as well, in terms of all this applies to me and my peers. Ben, in terms of, I know you touched on focus being on kind of mental health, and especially moving forward in terms of the next 5-10 years for the trust. Do you have a vision for what the trust looks like in 5-10 years out from now, or is it kind of growing in terms of volume, or new programs or partners? What's the goal?
Yeah, so we've just launched our 10-year ambition and a 3-year strategy to start that journey. For us, it's all about the impact, and if we get our impact right, then growth will follow, rather than having year-on-year targets just for the growth sake of it. So we're very fortunate that we have a board that is fully focused on doing the best for young people and ensuring that the impact we have is true, rather than doubling the size of the team in the space of 5 years. So what the 10 years looks like, I'm not sure what 5-10 years looks like. What 3 to 4 years looks like is very much, we have got a great model, but how do we meet the needs of young people? And this is what COVID's taught us, more than just us rocking up into community centre or a school and in those partnerships and hoping that young people can access our support. So we've started a great pilot with Alder Hey Children's Hospital, where we're delivering a virtual program, a digital program to young people from their hospital beds. which includes an app which they can access with lots of content in there around mindfulness. They have virtual mentoring with an athlete mentor around their aspirations and what they're looking for in the future. And then, not as good as this, James, we also have a podcast, which is just for those young people, which is interviewing young people, interviewing our athletes and just learning about how they deal with setback and how they plan for the future. So that's a really interesting piece of work for us, where we've moved into the health space for the very first time and working within the NHS. There will be more examples of that over the next 3 to 5 years. We're accessing young people where they need us, rather than young people having to try to come to where we are.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I was going to say, I just sorry to jump in. That's an interesting one in terms of going to where the young people are, whether it's different platforms, like social media platforms, Snapchat, and now when they're talking about the 5-10 years out, the metaverse or whatever that's going to look like, you're delivering programs in there. That's where all the kids spend most of their time.
Yeah, I haven't quite got my head around virtual reality and metaverse yet, but you're right. In COVID, we delivered we had to deliver fully virtual programs. There's a lot of learning from that, but there's also a lot of insight for those young people that enjoyed it more virtually. Those that have got caring responsibilities, those that have got disabilities, they found the whole process of accessing it from their houses, from their safe environments, caused less anxiety for them, less stress for them to try to get to the venues. So actually, there's a lot of learning we need to take from this around what's right for those young people and how do we have that hybrid model sort of moving forward. With the young carers, as a prime example, they were getting their families involved in some of the physical activity at the sessions as well. So not only was the young person benefit, they were being able to use that learning in those sessions to benefit their families as well. So it's these little nuggets that we need to better take on. And then how do we expand that? How do we grow that impact? And that's where the next sort of 3 years especially will be learning how we can have the greatest impact for those needs and understanding what those needs of those young people are.
Looking at kind of mental health, mental performance, etc., or just physical performance, we always ask about daily routines. So do you guys have any tactics that you use to keep the stress away or deal with it or stay physically active? I don't know if, Suzanne, if you're training as much as you used to, if you're still on the court a lot, what's your do you have any daily habits that you use?
Well, I'm a mother of 3 children under 5, so
okay. Sorry.
Life gets hectic.
Yeah, for sure.
I do find that I need to be physically active in order to safeguard my mental health. So I always set myself with a consistent goal of 3 times a week, on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I need to have done my workout. I've got my little subscription to Les Mills. And what I tell the young people and what I always try and tell myself as well, it doesn't have to be the world's best training session, which is something that's obviously difficult when you've been an athlete. It just needs to be consistent. And one thing that one of the athletes told me that's always stuck with me, she's a taekwondo player, Steph Allen, and she said to me, if you can't be motivated, be disciplined. And that's something that I always impart to the young people as well. It doesn't need to be, an absolutely the best workout you've ever had for it to count. It just needs to be consistent and you'll see the benefits for your mental and physical health. So, that's me. It's not going to break any records, my workouts these days, but also because I am on court, I do need to make sure that I'm moving around and being able to still coach effectively. With my husband, I force him onto the badminton court and once a week we play badminton.
Once a week you beat him at badminton, is what you're saying?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
I also have to do rehab on my hip due to the surgery I had on that. So then I always have to check in with as well.
Cool. What about you, Ben? Do you have any routines that you use?
Unlike Suzanne, I have the motivation, but not the discipline. So the one thing I do every week is play football. We've got a great sort of dad's 7-a-side football thing going on in where I live. And that's just a huge stress relief and I love it. Apart from that, I try to play golf once a week. I try to do yoga at least once a week. And I do my Apple Watch breathing, do at least 5 minutes of just silence, bit of breath work, meditation, sort of twice a week as well. But it's not consistent and I'm not disciplined. But it's similar to Suzanne, at 10 to 9, when both the kids are in school, I find my stress levels drop.
Yes,
that's my time where I can actually start thinking things through. And for me, it's just having that reflection sort of at one part of each day. What is it that's actually going on today or this week? And I think just giving yourself 5 minutes to reflect on what the key priorities are, it helps sort of cancel out the noise. So I always find that is better for my mental well-being than necessarily having a disciplined half an hour every day where I do something else.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good point in terms of that. The quality of the work, I don't have to be great, but it's like half an hour where you can't think of anything that's stressing you out because you're having to just do the exercise or play the sport. So always tends to help me anyway. Last question for me, and always is a reflective one that we always look at, is if you were going to go back and give yourself some advice. So before normally we look at like 18 as you're just starting out in kind of adulthood. If you're going to go back and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be? I'll go to Suzanne first.
That's a really good one. My piece of advice would be, don't worry what anybody else thinks and do what makes you happy, even if it doesn't kind of fit the narrative that people prescribe for you or that you think people think about you. Just do it for you.
Like it. Ben, what about you?
I think I'd just say, just calm down. Everything's going to be okay. I think, it's 18. I was living on my own, hand to mouth, had no money. Everything was a stress. Every single day was a stress. Going to college was a stress. Coming home was a stress. Just not really knowing what the future was going to hold. And you have those moments where you're really happy and you're ecstatic, you're going out with your friends, but actually you just have so much uncertainty. You don't know it at the time, but you have so much uncertainty, which is causing you to live your life in a certain way or react in certain ways to things. So I think, I'll just say, relax. Everything's going to be all right.
It's easy to get anxious about things, isn't it, as well, especially at that age and as you're coming into the world. So no, I love that one. Guys, thanks so much for coming on today. In terms of everything we've spoken about, we'll add it in the show notes. Suzanne, if we can find any of your music online, we'll try and add that in there as well for everyone to listen to it. And any performances you got, Ben, on YouTube that we can find.
Oh, no.
But no, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.